Hey, sixth grade, this is Mrs. Hartley. As we gear up for tomorrow's Asynchronous Wednesday, I thought I would put together a quick video just to walk you through what we need to do today. Um, Hopefully, if you're seeing this, you have found the assignment in Google Classroom. You should also have received an email. So you have an email chain now started with the other members of your group. You are welcome to use that today to coordinate who will be taking on what tasks. But I would also remind you that you can use the comments section in Google Classroom on the actual assignment that is assigned to you. So the day two assignment, any comments that you make on that will only be seen by other members of your group. So feel free to use that. If you want to organize some other way to talk to each other, please, by all means, feel free. I would just remind you to please be mindful of the other members of your group and make sure that whatever you choose is something that everyone can access. That's super important. Okay, you're working as a team. It's important to make sure that everybody is able to take part. Um, so that said, what I have created here are a couple of exemplars so I can show you kind of what this should look like. When you open up your task list, it will look similar to this, obviously not the same. But this should give you a pretty good idea of what the final product should look like. Okay, that's what we call an exemplar. I have also made an exemplar of the actual project slideshow. This one is about earthquakes because, of course, we've talked about this a lot in class. And so this makes an easy one for me to use as an example. Of course, yours does not have to look identical to mine. In fact, it really shouldn't. But if you get stuck and you're not quite sure how you all want to design your slide, you're welcome to look at mine and use it as a, source of inspiration or just something to sort of emulate. Okay, so just to walk you through the tasks, today's task, of course, we're going to start with research. And just like before, not everyone should be working on the research task together. They don't need to be done in this order. You do need to make sure you get some research done before you go putting any words on the slide. But one or two of you could be working on research tasks while others of you are getting the slideshow slides set up and looking for some images. So that's completely okay. I deliberately tried to organize your groups so that you had people that liked both sides of this. So hopefully there's somebody that's up for it. I will be looking to see if one person's name is everywhere, and I'll also be looking to see if somebody's name is not here at all. Because one person being everywhere may just be that person feels like no one else is pulling their weight. So they feel like they've got to do it all. It could also be that person's kind of hogging all the good tasks and the other group members don't feel like they can speak up. So we're going to be watching for that so that we can talk about it if that's what's going on. Of course, by the same token, if somebody's initials aren't showing up here at all, we'll know that somebody's not really pulling their weight, and that's another conversation we may need to have. But anyway, so what I've done here is I've given you one site. Every group will have one site that they can reference that is a pretty solid site with good information. So in this case, I've used the USGS site on earthquakes. So I've already called that up here. And the USGS is kind of like NASA for lithosphere things. So it has a lot of really cool interactive maps and things that we'll talk about a little later. But for now, this is a really great site. So what I've been asked to do is just read this section, says what is an earthquake, and summarize it in 3 bullets. Now this article, like many of its type, has a lot of new terms in it. So like fault plane, hypocenter, epicenter, foreshocks, main shock, aftershocks. It may be tempting to create like new bullets for each one of those just because they're new terms and they look like the kind of information you'd want to have. But just remember that our focus here is to create a guide for people that want to stay safe from these. And I just don't think that people who are in the middle of an earthquake are really worried about whether they're on a fault plane. Okay, what they're worried about is like, am I near the epicenter or am I out the rim? So you want to be a little careful about which terms like that you pull. And remember, you only really want 3. So the idea is to keep it short, but you want to make sure you're picking the most relevant 3. So I've written 3 here. And if you want to pause the slide and read what I've written, pause the video, you're welcome to do that. I basically just defined what an earthquake was. And then there's another header here. Sorry, under here that says what causes earthquakes and where do they happen. So I've of course read that. Then I've come back here and made some made some summarized bullets. The next task is to find a different site entirely. And the goal here is to not be using Wikipedia or Quora or any of those, or like a Google search, but instead to find a website that is another website that is a quality website where there's some experts ringing in. So I've chosen this National Geographic Resource Library. You'll see a lot of these. Some of you have these resource library articles as your suggested place to go because they're quite good. Anyway, what I've asked you to do is to read through that. Odds are a lot of the information that you've put up here will probably be on your site as well. So try to find just one or two other things that maybe aren't on the first site, or just other pieces of information that are germane to the topic, and add those here. The web links for the two things that you've used, so this one here and this one here, you're going to want to add to the references slide on your slideshow. So I'm going to show you that just a second. One last thing about dealing with Google Docs. We've been doing a lot of work with Google Slides in the classroom. Google Docs is obviously very similar, but it is its own animal in a couple of ways. Right now, and most of the time when you open up a Google Doc, it's going to be in what we call print layout. And print layout shows you kind of pretty accurately what it would look like on an actual piece of paper, which is handy. But for something like this, where you have a table that's kind of jumping across that gap, it can be really hard to follow what you're doing here and then coming down here for it. So one thing that I do recommend you consider is to go to the view and click where it says print layout so that this check mark disappears. So if I click that again, it'll just turn it off. So then when I click view, notice that it's gone, and notice that now when I scroll up and down this document, there's a line here to show me where the page break is, but it keeps the whole table together so I can kind of tell what's going on. So that should be true of you guys too. As you're entering text in here, that table is going to get very long. So it might be easier to view it in not print layout. The design tasks are, of course, to create the two slides. One should be about whatever it is that you're doing, and then the other one should be either about where do they happen or how they happen, depending on which topic you have. So it's going to guide you through that, and there's lots of reminders here that you want to double check yourself on. Big thing that I've noticed with slides and other makeup slides that you guys have done is you've got to keep that point at 18 points or more. I know it's tempting to want to type it all in there, but that's not, we're practicing summarizing. So this is a skill. So you want to make sure that your font is never smaller than 18 points, except in the references slides at the back. That's the only time that you can go smaller. Also, you want to make sure that you are using the same font on every slide so that you're not changing it up each time. I know fonts are fun and we may have differing opinions about which fonts we want to use, but I should not see Times New Roman on one slide and then Arial on another. Okay, that shouldn't be happening. So please make sure that you're using the same text each time, the same font style every time. So here's my example. Again, I use earthquakes because this is one that we've talked about a lot in class. So none of you have earthquakes as your topic. But here's my title slide, and notice that I've given it a title. The title that you guys choose for yours can be whatever makes sense, but just remember that there's an emphasis on keeping safe, not just reporting on it. So keep that in mind. Your slide should have everybody's name on it, preferably the hour too, and then maybe the date would be great. I have also added some illustrations here, which you should also have done last week. So you should have at least one picture here and here. And then what you may not have been able to do because you didn't have an images slide. Some of you already put yours in, which was great. But you would want to take the links from these and put them in the back. And you'll notice that if you go to my image credit slide, which is the very last slide, I have already done that. So here are my two links that go to those two photos. So that's it. And then I've made my first slide, talks about what an earthquake is. So I have defined that an earthquake occurs when large chunks of earth move in response to pressure from inside the earth. Movement can be mild or severe, can cause a lot of damage. And then earthquakes have an epicenter where the strongest shaking occurs. So I chose this again because this is a term that you often hear reported on. When you hear it on the news, they will talk about how far you were from the epicenter and how far they could feel shaking. So I've chosen 3 images for this one. You do not have to choose one for each bullet point, but the bullet points that I had here were kind of lent themselves to having an illustration for each one. So here's a diagram that shows the plates moving back and forth. Here is a picture of some destruction after, I believe, a earthquake in San Juan. And then down here, this is an image of the, well, basically the waves of shaking that went on after an earthquake up in the Great Lakes. So, or up basically in like Ohio, I believe. So you can really see here where the epicenter is, and you can see that there's these kind of irregular circles that form around the outside. And what the geological survey or seismologists will do is they may have in some cities and that they may have some instruments there that are measuring the earthquakes as they happen, which is very common, of course, on the coast where earthquakes are happening all the time. But if it's in an area that's in the middle of the land, like in the case of Michigan and some of these central ones, what they'll do is they'll just interview people and find out how much of a shake did you experience? Was it hard enough that you actually woke up out of sleep? Was it enough that stuff on your wall went crooked, or was it actually so heavy that stuff fell off of walls or off of shelves, or and then was there any structural damage? Did something happen to your house as a result of that? So that's kind of how they measure. And what you'll find is that closer you get to the epicenter, the more damage gets done. The further out you get, of course, it gets less. But this is why we say an earthquake is not a small scale event. Okay, this is a regional event. Even when it happens in one town, you can feel the effect of that sometimes several states away. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, earthquakes can happen. We've talked about this too. So this is the second slide you'll be working on, and yours may be how, because some of the topics that we're talking about, like flooding, that can happen almost anywhere. So the how might be a better way to go at that, and that'll be fine. I'll let you guys kind of make that call. I made a suggestion in most of your tip sheets, your task sheets, but you can decide for yourself. Earthquakes can occur anywhere there's a crack in Earth's crust, especially at these plate tectonic boundaries. So I have this map here. Earthquakes are especially common at convergent tectonic plate boundaries where continental plates are pushing into ocean plates. The Ring of Fire, which is all around the Pacific Ocean, is especially prone to earthquakes. So I have this lovely image here of the Ring of Fire. And again, both of these, I've taken the website and I put it back in my image credits. I also have, per instructions, listed the two websites that I used today back here. So there will be more sites that we'll add later. One quick tip about this, and I guess I'll use this slide because I know this will work well. I'm going to delete this real quick so I can show you, remind you how to use this Explore tool. On your slide, it may look kind of grayish. Depends on how big your slides are, or it may be yellow. But it says Explore when you put your mouse over it. So it'll always be down in this corner. So when you click on it, it's going to open up a panel, and you can do a search for earthquake. Uh-oh, wait a minute, go back. Earthquake. Search for that, and then you can do an image search. And notice there's my map, so that's obviously where I got it. This picture also I got from there. And you can scroll down quite a bit and see some things. Any one of the images that show here are okay to use from a copyright standpoint. But what you'll do is you just kind of click on it and drag it over. It'll probably be too big when you first bring it over because it's not made to go on your slide. So notice that it runs off the slide here. So to make it smaller, of course, I'm going to grab this handle and drag. But one thing I will just remind you is that when you do that, before you click on it, like right now, I haven't clicked on anything. I'd put my cursor there and hold down the Shift key and keep it held down while I drag. And I know that can be kind of tricky on a touchpad, but it's important because if I were to take this map and just like start moving it without doing that, I end up squishing it and then it loses its perspective. So it's really, it's not a good idea to squish your images in any case. Like that's pretty much never a good idea. It just makes it look weird, and everyone who looks at it, their brain immediately tries to stretch it in the direction that it's supposed to go, and it becomes very distracting. So it's better if you hold down Shift and just try to make it small enough to fit without squishing it or stretching it out. So that is a pretty handy tool, the Explore tool. But what's really great about it is after you've done that, when you click on it again, notice that the link that it came from, which is the link you need for your image slide, is already attached to it. All you have to do is hit copy right here and then come down here and paste it in. Okay. Just another reminder too, the text on your image credits and your references slides do not need to be 18 point type. They should not be smaller than 10 though. This is, I think, 14. So this is 14 point. This one is 10. So you can see how very tiny it gets at 10. So it's okay as long as it's still legible, but you do not want to go smaller than 10 because then it just becomes ridiculous. It's too much, too hard to read. Okay, so that's pretty much all you have to do. Hopefully, you need to have this part done by next week. But the last thing you do need to make sure you take care of is that you complete the survey form. So these should be linked with your assignment in Google Classroom. This is your attendance for today since we are asynchronous and I'm not there to take attendance. So if I don't get this form from you, I can't count you present for the day. So I'm going to also put that in the email. I'm also going to put that in Google Classroom. Hopefully between the three, you'll figure it out that this has to be done. But when you complete this today, what you'll be talking about is not just what goes on today, because you may or may not be able to get it together today, but how productive your group was over this past week. Okay. So when you're reporting in and talking about, who do you feel like was really contributing? Who do you feel like kind of maybe wasn't helping so much? Be thinking not just about today, but think about the whole week. Okay. That is all. I will do my best to be available. Have meetings all day tomorrow, and we are helping people move. So I don't think I'm going to be able to have like a Zoom up or anything like that. But I will try to have one up between 1 and 2, and that way, if we have office hours, you guys can swing by then. And that's that. Email me if you have any questions. I'll do my best to get back to you. Have a good day, you guys. I will see you on Thursday and Friday. Don't forget about the test.